Hi everyone. It's really nice for me to be here today in front of everyone, but I'll be honest with you, I'm feeling really nervous. I've never spoken in front of so many people, so I've got feelings of excitement, and I also feel nervous as well. Thanks for the introduction, Luke. You've covered my first slide for me, so that saves me a job. But for those that don't know me, I'm Imran. I'm a lead UX designer at Co-op, and I work with the Experience Library. For those that don't know, the Experience Library is our design system. We called it the Experience Library because we wanted it to be more than just a design system and actually about all experiences, not just digital experiences. I've worked in design for around 15 years, and actually saying that out loud just feels really strange to me because it hasn't felt like 15 years. I still feel like I'm learning. I still feel like I'm growing. I've been learning today, and I think I'll continue learning for as long as I can. What I can say is that over the past 15 years, I've been able to observe a lot of teams, see a lot of people working with design systems, and just generally in tech and design. And it's helped me see what we can do in the future to change how we work and hopefully work better together. So I'd like to start the talk by referring to these words that you can see on screen here. Having more time doesn't mean you should do more. These are words that my dad said to me many times throughout my life as I was growing up. And each time he said these words to me, I didn't really understand the intent behind the words. I didn't really take the time to understand these words. In 2008, my dad died, and suddenly these words started to mean more to me. And that's what happens when someone dies. The words that they leave you with, they start to mean more to you. I can honestly tell you, like anybody that's lost anybody, that I feel like I never had enough time with my dad. I needed more time to learn from him. He was a really thoughtful person. And the reality is, there simply isn't enough time. Time is always working against us. When I was going through the grief after losing my dad, it felt like time had slowed down. And it feels like that sometimes, doesn't it? When you want to get out of something, it can feel like time around you is slowing down. And sometimes when you're enjoying something, maybe you're on holiday, maybe you're having a great time in your life for some reason, it can feel like time moves really quickly. But time never helps us. We spend most of our life working to the clock. We try and fill time with more things to do. We try and fill time with more things to do. Each day is filled with more things to do, and we get to the end of the day and we feel like actually we haven't done enough. We didn't get everything done that we wanted to get done. So there's still not enough time. Maybe there's not enough time because your calendar looks like this. Maybe it looks better than this, hopefully. Maybe there's not enough time because your phone looks like this. Maybe you've got notifications, things seeking your attention, asking you to do more and more. Maybe you've got a watch that does this as well. Maybe your car looks like this. Apple tell us that this is the future of cars. More screens, more things to do, more things seeking your attention. Asking you to do more, almost stopping you from doing the thing that you should be doing, which is driving a car safely. Maybe your product roadmap looks like this. Maybe you've looked for any opportunity to design more, build more, test more. Maybe you're filling every gap available with more things to do. The problem with doing too much is that we never get the time to understand things. We never stop to process what's happening around us, what's happening inside us, how things are making us feel, and the impact of those things on those around us. If we just think about the design space for a moment, there's a lot of pressure that exists in the design space. Today, me being on stage, this is pressure for me, because I'm on a lineup with incredible people that I've looked up for years, people that are doing incredible work in the design research space. And it'll no doubt be the same for everyone that's listening to me now. You see people around you that are incredible, they're learning new tools, they're learning new processes, and you want to aspire to be like them. You want to do more, and you want to learn more. I often think that the learning in the design space that we do is focused around external sources. So you see a thing that someone is doing, and you want to learn that. You hear about a tool, maybe a process, maybe something else, and you want to learn that. Rarely does that focus on learning shift to ourselves. Rarely does that focus ask questions about what's going on inside us. What's driving us from one moment to the next? What's motivating us to do the things that we're doing every day? What's driving you to be here in this moment right now? Are you here to learn? Or is it something more? What's motivating me to be here in this moment, standing before you, talking about this, asking these questions? Feelings drive us from one moment to the next. When I think back to the grief that I felt when my dad died, back to that moment in 2008, I can't really remember the detail of what was said, what people were doing, what happened the day before, the day after. Those things are often just a memory lost through time. What I do remember is how it felt. That feeling is still inside me. And it's feelings that drive us from one moment to the next. When something good happens in your life or something bad happens in your life, you never forget that feeling. You can always remember how it felt, how someone made you feel. But we never focus on that. We never stop to understand what those feelings, what those experiences mean for us. Now, on the topic of learning just becomes harder as we get older. If you look at how children grow up, they grow up through trying things, experimenting, failing fast, learning, trying again, not giving up. Science shows us, as you can see on screen here, some great research by Harvard University, that as we get older, it becomes harder for us to respond to experiences and introduce change. So learning gets harder as we get older. That's the reality. Not every type of learning starts in the same place. It starts with an unknown. There's a thing that you don't know about. Let's think about the design space. So there's a tool that you've not heard about. You hear about it. It was an unknown. Suddenly, you're aware of it. It's only when you become aware of it that you can actually act upon it. This is a great learning model that you can see on screen, developed in the 1960s. And like many learning models, it starts in this place of not being aware of something and then becoming aware. And as I said, it's only when we become aware that we can act on something. And this jump from not being aware to being aware is really important. How much time do we take to become aware of our motivations in life, in work, in the interactions that we have with people? What bias do we take into different conversations? How much time do we spend becoming aware of those things? This is where reflective practice can help. So reflective practice is all about looking inwards. It's about digging away at your feelings, the things that drive you, the things that motivate you. Processing everything that goes on in around you. So all of the experiences that you have, the conversations that you have, those moments when you feel anxious, the things that bother you, when you try to get feedback on work, when you go to present something, when you stood on stage and you're doing a talk on reflective practice, all of these things come into play in reflective practice. And reflective practice encourages the deepest form of reflection. So not simply the things that you're doing, but what's the underlying architecture under those things that you're doing? What can you learn from them? What can you change? How can that impact other people in a different way? When I think of reflection, I see it as the only way that we can slow down time. Because reflection is ultimately about not doing things, to actually stop doing things. Reflection is about thinking time. It's about putting your phone, your devices, the things that are seeking your attention out of your way so that you can really have that time to process what's happening, what you're doing, and really think about things, really understand things. And when you do that, it can start to feel like time around you is slowing down. And when you slow down time around you, you're trying to understand things better. Now, when we think of the design space, when I think of the experience library design system which I work on, it's actually all about understanding things. That's what we do in design, isn't it? We try and understand people, we try and understand processes, businesses, systems, and we try and act upon that understanding. If we don't build an understanding of something, we're just designing for the sake of it. We're just building for the sake of it. When I think of the experience library, every conversation that we have in the team is informed by how we can build an understanding of what our community needs. Where does the design system at Co-op go in the future? These are things that we try and understand. Early on in my career, I remember being shown this diagram, an empathy map, and being told that this was a step in the design process. Is that what this is? A step in the design process? Is that what empathy is? Just a step in a process? Empathy shouldn't just be a step in a process. Empathy shouldn't just be for the people that use our products and services. Empathy should be for those communities that we build systems for. Everything we do should be informed by empathy. But the first step to understanding other people is to understand yourself. The reality is, for design system teams, you're not just trying to understand your communities that are using the design system. You're also trying to design components, patterns, documentation, everything that people will use, but also the end users for products and services. So thinking about Co-op for a moment, we work with the community, we build for the community, but actually everything we build, everything we design is being used in our products and services, like Co-op food, Co-op funeral care. So you're thinking about not just a single group of users. And these users, by the way, in the community are ones that you can see and you can talk to, you can go and have a conversation with. If we don't take the time to have empathy with that group, how can we possibly have empathy with a group that we don't see every day? Those end users that use the products and services. And the first step to that process is self-empathy. It's to understand yourself. Because you can't begin to understand other people if you don't take the time to understand yourself first. When I think of design systems in the future, and when I have conversations at Co-op with colleagues and team members and community members about the future of the experience library, for me it always comes back to a design system that is much more than the sum of the parts. So it's actually about starting a conversation with people. It's about how we can work together with compassion. How through that experience of working together, we can learn from each other. How we can help each other, be there for each other. Not just because somebody needs a component or a pattern, but actually because the design system team at Co-op is central and sat in the middle of product teams. So maybe the community needs more than a component. Maybe the community needs more than a pattern. Maybe there's a team that's going through a really difficult period of time. Maybe there's a team that needs support with something other than what's in the design system. And when I think of design systems in the future, I see design systems being curated around compassion, empathy, but all of it begins with understanding ourselves first. So why is it important to understand ourselves? Is that just knowledge for the sake of it? Understanding ourselves is really important because it means every action we take can be deliberate. Everything we do can be considered. The steps that we take to talk to people, the conversations we have, the way we support the community, the way we have empathy for product teams that might be under a lot of pressure, it all comes back to deliberate action. We can't simply have our heads down in the hope that if we keep doing things, it'll be okay in the end. We almost have a moral responsibility to understand ourselves so we can really see how we interact with people, what kind of impact we have through the language we use, the way we engage with the community, the way we work with people, how open we are, how we make time for people, everything. Deliberate action is really, really important, and I just want everyone to think about that for a moment. The photograph that you can see on screen here is of New Zealand's Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern. I can't think of anybody in politics at the moment that is more deliberate in their action. This photograph was taken shortly after a tragic event in New Zealand a few years ago. And for me, this is a really powerful photograph, not simply because of the compassion and empathy on display, but this is a person that is not simply doing things. This is a person that's taking deliberate action to understand others and to join them and be there when they're needed. And that's what empathy is, isn't it? Empathy is standing with someone else. Now, if we just think about deliberate action, reflective practice is the mechanism that can help you ensure the actions you take are more deliberate. And you're not just getting lost in this sea of doing things, in this society which will continue to give you more things to do. Technology improves, systems improve, processes, organizations start introducing new things. You're getting messages on Slack, on Teams, on Yammer, and tons of other things. Society is never going to slow down. Technology is not going to slow down. We have to learn to slow down things ourselves. And the mechanism for that is reflective practice. Some more Harvard research here. You've probably gathered that I'm a fan of Harvard research. Again, there's lots of evidence to show that reflective practice can lead to really, really positive results for those people involved. This research was done in 2014, and it was a great piece of research. 2 groups of people were asked to perform tasks throughout the day. One group was asked to finish at the end of the day, and simply that's the end of their day. And the other group was asked to spend 15 minutes just processing what they'd been through the day, what they'd felt, what anxieties they'd had, what bothered them, what they'd enjoyed, what they hadn't enjoyed. Just to process it, just to understand it. Because our society is so fast and it's moving so quickly, we rarely get that moment to just stop and process what we're doing, process what's happening around us. And this is great research where the group that actually did this 15 minutes of reflection, they felt happier, they felt more productive, they felt less burnt out. Because it's very easy to ignore the fact that when we're constantly doing things, it's okay, we get to the end of the day and we're tired and we go to sleep, but actually we need time to process things. When you process things, you can feel more settled. And there's some really, really wonderful people at the peak of their discipline, either now or in the past, that have used reflection to become who they are and who they have been for their respective discipline. People who didn't just learn through external sources, people who didn't just simply look at what other people were doing, they actually said, I'm going to carve my own path to success, because my path to success is different from other people. I will find out what I'm about, and I will act upon that. I will understand myself better, so the impact on others is improved. So what I'd like to do is share a few tips on reflective practice, on how you can get started. You can find lots of resources online. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I just want to share some of the tips that I think have been really important for me and have been important for people that I've shared these tips with. So the first thing you have to do is you have to create the space to think. So far this talk's been really heavily focused on the idea of not doing things or the fact that we do too much. Well, actually, reflective practice starts when we say, okay, I'm going to stop doing things. I'm going to create that space. Not just that physical space where you go into a room and you leave your phone somewhere else and you take your watch off, no distractions. But that mental space as well, where you can get away from your work, from your life. And we all have pressures at work, we have pressures at home. But actually create that space for yourself. And the reason you create that space for yourself, I always try and think of thoughts like they're leaves falling off a tree. Sometimes we need to give that time to ourselves where our thoughts can just naturally land where they need to land, so we can understand them better, so we can appreciate the meaning of the experiences that we have every day. So creating that space is that first step to practicing reflection. When you have that physical and mental space, maybe that's 15 minutes at the end of each day, maybe it's in the evening when you feel like you've done everything you can and now you're going to pause. It's important that you go into this space, this mental space, this physical space with the right mindset. We often think that our thoughts and who we are two entities that are all interlinked, but the reality is they're two separate entities. And the mindset that you need for reflective practice is to say, you know what, actually, I'm the observer of my thoughts. I'm not going to bring emotion into my thoughts that I had throughout the day, the things I thought about, the way I approached things, the bias that I took into a conversation, the expectations I had. There's going to be no emotion because I'm an outside observer looking at these thoughts, assessing them, trying to understand them, and hopefully question them to see what I can learn from them, to see what I can change in the future. There's a great theory, it's called the self-awareness theory, and I'd really recommend looking at it. It's this great idea that actually you separate yourself from your thoughts and your emotions, and you see them as two separate entities. So I'd really urge you all to have a look at that. It's readily available on the web. The next step is to think about what questions you're going to ask yourself. When you're reviewing your thoughts and the experiences that you're having, it's really important that you try and dig deeper than just the actions and the behaviors that you kind of can recall from a given experience. It's important to go much deeper. So your questioning, your line of questioning, needs to be considered. It needs to be thoughtful. And it needs to really dig into motivations, things that are driving you. Why did you take that emotion into a conversation? Is it because of something that happened in the past? Why did you feel anxious in that moment when you were trying to get feedback on your work? Questions that help you dig away at what drives you from one moment to the next. And the final step, you have to be brave. If you're going to journey inwards and you want to learn about yourself, and you want to take something from that learning so you can apply it into the future and you can change what you're doing, so you're not just constantly doing the same thing over and over again, you have to be brave, because that journey is going to be about you questioning yourself, learning to change things about yourself. And you need that willingness. You need that attitude, that willingness, that mindset that, you know what, I want to go on this journey because I believe I can change what I do. I believe I can have better impact on the people around me, the communities around me, the design work that I do, the design systems I work with. All of that impact can change through this work. For anybody that's seen any of my talks before, you'll know how much I love Brené Brown. And I can't think of a better quote than this to kind of really touch on this point of having courage when you do go on this journey inwards. You can choose courage or you can choose comfort. You cannot have both. Sometimes we have to make that call. In our society at the moment, I would argue that there's too much of trying to kind of sit between the two. I think what we need is to have that courage to journey inwards and to say we're not going to accept comfort. So we circle back at these words that my dad said to me and I didn't understand at the time. I understood these words because I was grieving for my dad. And actually it was grief that helped me slow down time. It was grief that helped me actually stop doing things. It was grief that helped me stop and actually process what I was going through. Process and understand the things that my dad had said to me. The work we do on design systems is all about empathy and compassion. And it starts with us learning about ourselves first. If we can understand ourselves better, it means we have a better chance of understanding others. It means our impact can be elevated. It took grief for me to slow down time. And my question is, why should we wait until we're grieving or going through something terrible for time to slow down? Why can we not slow down times ourselves and actually think about what we're going through, understand the experiences that we're having when we're working with teams and communities, when we're thinking about what our design system feels like in the future? Instead of just doing more and releasing more, why can we not simply just slow things down and understand ourselves so we can see the future impact? So my question to you is, after this talk, what will you do differently tomorrow? Thank you very much.